A little while ago now, I did a video all about this principle of what we call the recovery iceberg. So post-session, all of our recovery, or majority of it, is dictated by the really big foundations we can't see below the surface of the water, which is essentially sleep, hydration, nutrition. The big three things you need to be doing to recover as best you can. But there is a whole bunch of methods out there in the industry that it's worth talking about. Some of the ways we can get that extra little benefit or maybe recover just that tiny bit faster to put the icing on the cake. And they're all the things that we do see above the surface of the water. So things like ice baths or cold water immersion, contrast water therapy, compression, massage, all of these things. So what I wanted to do today is break down some of the key ones that I like to sort of work in, and some of the ones that have been shown to work a little bit, the processes behind them, a little bit of the science in there as well, to help guide you in the best direction to make the most of your recovery time. Hey YouTube, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Today's topic is all about recovery, as I said in the intro, but if you do get anything out of today, you enjoy the videos, you've been enjoying the content so far, make sure you do hit the subscribe button to keep supporting the channel. If anything, it's going to notify you when a new video does come up, and you're going to keep up to date with all the latest content that is coming out in the channel. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to answer as many of your questions as possible, and jumping on the live streams, getting involved in and amongst the community to help you guys learn as much as you can about your performance, about sports science, and break it down in a really simple way. On the other side of things, other than just hitting that big red sub button, if you've already done that, which a lot of you already have, maybe consider hitting the share button, sending this video or one of the other videos you've watched before that you really enjoyed and got some value out of. Send that to someone that you think also might benefit from listening or watching that video. Particularly today, recovery is a big part of what we do in terms of being an athlete, or if you're a coach. So if this video can help someone else as well as yourself to recover better and perform, train, and improve their performance, that's going to be really awesome for everyone involved. So if you do hit that big share button, that'd be really, really appreciated. Like I said in the beginning of this video, in the introduction, it's all about these real 1%ers today. We've talked through the recovery iceberg, and it's linked down in the description if you want to go through what the recovery iceberg is and the basic foundations: sleep, nutrition, hydration. But today's more about the 1%ers. What are the little things that we can do to top off and put the icing on the cake, if you like? So the first thing I'm going to talk through today is really a number of different concepts that I'm going to roll into one, because they all fundamentally are trying to do the same thing. And this is around anything that provides a massage benefit or a massage effect. So that's whether you're getting a direct massage, probably not too much at the moment with COVID restrictions, things like that. Whether you're doing some self-massage, so foam rolling, using a lacrosse ball, using a vibrating foam roller, any of these implements that you might do it yourself, or even something like recovery boots if you have access to them. I'm not going to go through specific brands, but essentially the inflatable boots, you would have seen them on my channel before. Putting them on, they compress. It's like a big blood pressure cuff. It really inflates, builds a whole bunch of pressure on the outside of your legs, or you can get ones for your arms as well. Builds a whole bunch of pressure, compresses, and then releases, and it helps to sort of create a bit of a massaging effect that way. All of these methods are essentially a passive way, and when I say passive, you don't necessarily have to create any movement, of engaging the skeletal muscle pump. And the skeletal muscle pump, all it is when muscles contract or get pushed onto the blood vessels. The blood vessels constrict, so they close up. But then what happens is when everything's released and the pressure releases, and we're not constricting or we're not contracting the muscles, everything opens up and we get promotion of blood flow. So this pumping effect helps to cycle blood around the body, helps to clear out some of our metabolic byproducts, so things like lactic acid or the acidic part accumulated in the body. Any other nutrients can then also flow through the body. Oxygen can flow through the body better when we get blood flow happening rather than just sitting down and being passive. Now, the typical way of doing this would be to go and do your cool down, but now we're sort of talking about recovery methods that would be after your session. So this is the type of thing that if you're doing any sort of foam rolling or anything to continue this active recovery process, because when we go and do a cool down, we're still moving. That's creating the skeletal muscle pump effect, because the muscles contract and then relax and they push on the blood vessels and open them up. We're just now doing this from a massage perspective, where I don't have to now physically exert myself to create that pumping effect. I've got someone pushing on the muscles for me, or another implement pushing on those blood vessels and then releasing that pressure also. So like I said, it's mainly to produce a bit of blood flow, clear out some of those metabolic byproducts. 20 to 30 minutes is probably more than enough. We don't really need to be doing massive amounts of this, particularly immediately post-session. And within about 2 hours of your session, it's probably a really good time to help flush out some of those byproducts and accelerate that recovery process, or at least kickstart it a little bit more. Doing it the next day as well can also be useful, just to reduce a little bit of stiffness, waking up first thing in the morning. And particularly if you're on a heavy training schedule where you're training most days of the week, doing it first thing in the morning as a recovery method from the day before is just a good way to start your day, feel like you're loose and reduce a bit of stiffness anyway. It is going to help get that blood flow happening in the morning as well. So it is a good method there. There isn't necessarily any sort of, I guess, negatives so much here. We just want to be careful if there is any injury that's occurred. You probably want to be careful about how much pressure you're putting into a potential injury site. So if you do feel something go, you're better off sort of leaving it rather than, or if you've got some heavy bruising, you might feel like you got muscle tear or anything like that. I wouldn't actually massage that area immediately just in case you do any further damage. It's more of just a preventing any further risk. But if all is good at the end of your session, doing a bit of massage or self-massage using the recovery boots within that sort of 2 hour window immediately after can be really useful. And then the next day as well is also another way to incorporate it into your routine as well. The second one I want to go through today is contrast water therapy. Now, there's a couple of therapies I'm going to talk about in terms of water therapies in these next two, but contrast water therapy is essentially as the name suggests, hot to cold, changing or contrasting conditions. So what we do is and a really simple protocol to follow would be something like 1 minute in hot and then 30 seconds in the cold. And by going between these two methods, we get the same effect as what we talked about before for massage, but it's the hot and cold that is doing that constriction of blood vessels and dilation to allow blood flow to come through. The cold restricts everything and brings everything, I guess, tightens everything up. Obviously, you jump in, you feel like you need to stiffen up in the cold, then you get in the warm, and the warm is going to open everything up. And so that's how we can get this blood flow pumping effect, very similar to what you would get in a massage. But it's not necessarily the most practical because it's difficult to get. It's difficult to get in a set of baths to be able to do it. You can do it in your shower, but it's probably not as effective because a large part of the water therapies rely on what we call hydrostatic pressure. So it's actually being submerged in water. This is why you see the footballers and soccer players go down to the beach in the cold water at the beach, because the pressure around their limbs and submerged in limbs, and why baths are better than, say, showers. That's actually going to cause a little bit of that promotion of blood flow as well because of the changes in pressure in and around the body. So particularly salt water has been really a really good one for that. So doing it in a bath situation is probably more ideal. Doing it in the showers is okay. But if you are going to do a water therapy, hot cold might be a good alternative because if you don't actually like the cold too much, it's just a quick one. You don't only have to repeat this 3 or 4 times to be able to get a benefit. And again, it's kind of similar to what you would get from massage anyway. So you can work out whether that's something you would prefer, or if you'd prefer just to do some massage or recovery boots, whatever you've got access to. Number 3 kind of follows on from the last one in terms of things like ice baths and what we call cold water immersion. This one's a really popular one. We see it come up all the time on social media feeds. I really like it from a perspective of reducing a little bit of, I guess, the trauma or pain or inflammation you might have from doing a really hard, intense effort. Particularly as well, if you have to back up, this one's a really useful method. If you have to back up, do a race in the morning, a race in the afternoon, or if you're playing tournaments as a player and you have to perform in the morning, perform immediately the next day, back to back to back, can be good just to reduce that inflammation and reduce a little bit of that perception of pain or perception of fatigue in the legs. Doing it in anywhere between sort of 11 to 15 degrees has been shown to have some pretty good benefit. Doing it in for about 11 to 15 minutes is also sort of ideal. So you can kind of think in terms of degrees. However many degrees you're doing is probably how many minutes you're doing as well. A large part is determined by your body fat percentage as well. Obviously, leaner athletes probably don't need it as cold to feel that cold, whereas bigger athletes, more muscle mass, etc., it's going to take a little bit cooler conditions to actually get through into the inner parts of the body in terms of that temperature moving inwards. You can just do your lower body if you prefer. I've done this before, just doing my calves or just doing my, I guess, from hips down. Don't actually have to do the whole body submerged, but it really is more effective. As I mentioned, it's more effective if you're trying to back up events day after day. And when I say events, I'm talking events. It's not necessarily just training. It's if you have to back up really big, hard physical exertions, either on the same day or day after day, that's where it has its most effectiveness. In terms of long-term, doing it all the time isn't necessarily something that some of the research advises, purely from the fact it can actually blunt a little bit of the adaptation in terms of some inhibition to some mitochondrial type things, particularly as well any muscle hypertrophy. If you're trying to build any muscle, it's also going to have some longer-term adverse effects to that. So it's the type of thing, only using it immediately after some really hard efforts, or if you've got a game, do it after the game and then probably don't really touch it for the rest of the week, is something you can, I guess, get away with, and you're going to get a really good stimulus or a benefit from a recovery perspective out of that. Another thing I will touch on with cold water immersion as well, there is a little bit of research to say it puts you a little bit more in what we call a parasympathetic state. That's a nervous system, a fancy nervous system term for saying it's getting you into a recovery zone. When we're active, when we're performing, we're in a more of a sympathetic nervous state, so we're up and about, we're excited, we've got a lot of adrenaline running through the system. When we're in a parasympathetic, that brings us back more in alignment with, well, I'm starting to get ready to now go to sleep, or I'm starting to get ready, like the body is putting itself into a recovery mode. The cold water can sometimes do that because it gets you all like sort of tensed up. You get out and you get that vasodilation as you start to warm up, and it releases a bit of that sort of, I guess, stress, if you like, and it takes a bit, it gives you a bit of a relief. What does that do? That puts you a bit more preparedness to recover, and it might allow you to sleep better. It might allow you to get into that recovery process a little bit better as well. So from a psychological perspective, it can be a bit useful. Number 4, the next one we'll move on to is compression. Now, there is a little bit of debate whether compression actually does much at all. Localized compression, and when I say compression, garments in particular, you need to make sure they're tight to be able to have a localized blood flow effect. I personally use either the compression tights or the compression socks, mainly because of some other things that I've got going on outside of just performance and more from a medical side of things, that I need to use those on things like flights after heavy bouts of activity. I like the sensation of it from a psychological perspective, which I'm going to get to in number 5 in terms of how important the psychology is. But they can improve a little bit of localized blood flow, a little bit of metabolic byproduct removal as well, similar to what we're getting from a massage, because it is putting that constriction. And then when you move in that compression garment, it loosens it, everything opens up, and then it just constricts back to you when you stop moving. So that's really the principle of how they're working. Can help to decrease the perception of delayed onset muscle soreness as well. So that's going to help that psychology of how heavy the legs feel, I guess, the next day. There's no known negative effect of wearing compression, so there's no, I guess, detriment by wearing it necessarily. But at the same time, there isn't any clear evidence saying why you should be wearing it. So it's one of those ones I've left a little bit lower on this list. I like using it more because I get a bit of a placebo benefit out of it. And that's where I'm going to roll into this last one, number 5 here, is we can't underestimate the things that you really buy into and believe in strongly, and almost it works as a placebo, is potentially going to do more for you than some of the methods I've just listed here. Outside of sleep, nutrition, hydration, if you got all those right, if you 110% believe in something that's going to improve your recovery, whether that's having a glass of, like a lot of people might have a protein shake after their session. A lot of people might have a particular electrolyte drink, or they feel like they need to go and have a nap after their session, or they like to put their legs up a wall to get blood flow back up to the heart. Any of these methods may not necessarily have a scientific tick the box, yes, it is going to provide me an absolute guaranteed benefit in terms of building on a recovery process or accelerating recovery, improving recovery. But if you feel like you're going to recover better as a result of it, and you strongly believe in it, and as long as it's doing no harm, that's the critical one. If it's not doing any harm to you, but it's not really doing any benefit physiologically or scientifically, but you 100% believe in it, and you actually find when you don't have that implement, you don't recover as well without it, go for it. This is exactly what I experience with compression. Whenever I wear my compression socks or I wear my compression tights after a hard session, I feel like I need to wear them. I always will wear them, maybe have a nap, and I've sometimes slept in compression overnight if I'm really sore. I wake up the next day and I feel better, mainly because I've had the peace of mind that I think the compression is going to work for me, and maybe it puts me in a better state to then go to sleep and get that proper recovery I need. It's just a facilitator. It doesn't necessarily contribute to anything. It just, I feel like it is contributing. So we can't underestimate the placebo, or what we call the belief effect. The science here actually, and I'm going to argue this in terms of the science here in terms of belief effect, placebo, believing in something 110% and having it actually work for you, even though it could be not doing anything at all, is arguably more a stronger set of science than any of the stuff I've just talked through, in terms of it's been proven again and again and again for years, hundreds of years, that this placebo and belief effect is actually really strong for making change and actually positively improving someone's outcome. There's a very quick example I want to give. Looking through some of the research, there's been some stuff into surgeries post-injury, athletes electing to have surgery, thinking that's going to be the path. The doctors actually can't do anything. They put the athlete under anesthetic. They make a small incision, so they've got a little scar in their knee or the little scar in their back. They open it up, they close it up straight away, they don't actually touch anything. The athlete wakes up, thinks they've had surgery, and they naturally actually recover a lot faster. That's one extreme example, but it has happened. So placebo and belief effect can't be underestimated. That's a little bit of a summary of some of these 1% methods that you can use in a recovery process. What do you use outside of just sleep, nutrition, hydration? Do you use any of these? Let me know in the comments down below. What works for you? Have you thought about the placebo and belief effect benefit in what that impacts your decisions as well? Let me know in the comments as always. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Really enjoy you jumping on and supporting the channel as best you can. That is it for today, and we'll see you in the next one.